What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss even more iOS 18 features and changes. We're going to talk about how Apple defended their AI, Apple's plan to make every device as thin and light as possible, an update on the Apple Vision Pro 2 being canceled, Apple's clapback at the EU, a crazy AirTag story, and more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and check out the Apple Den newsletter. Okay, so let's start with even more iOS 18 features and changes. And the first one has to do with messages and with the tap back emojis. So now with iOS 18, as you know, you can now tap back and react to a message with any emoji. Well, now it looks like those are actually working for SMS messages as well. So this is a group chat I was in where you can see they are green bubbles, and you can now see the custom tap back emoji as a reaction to that message. And then also, if you had iOS 18 and you were texting somebody on iOS 17 and you responded to one of their messages with a custom emoji as the tap back, they would not get anything. It would just be a ghost notification. They would not see anything on their device. But now we get this message that says reacted with that emoji to that message. It just types it out right there. So something changed server side with Apple over the past week, where now that is what you get when you respond to an iOS 17 user with a tap back emoji. So now in iOS 18, you can link your local energy provider to the home application. And I talked about this in a previous video, but I never actually showed what it looked like. So here is what it looks like when it was actually connected to, your local energy provider. So you can see the electricity usage, you can see the average, you can see the specifics for off-peak electricity rates, and it says price lowered until 12 a.m. And here is also a graph where you can see the usage based on your actual energy provider's rates. So that is very cool. It is only available for select energy providers, and mine is not included. This was actually a screenshot from Reddit, but it's really cool to see how that looks. Also in iOS 18, if you go to the control center and go down to the connectivity section and you haptic press on the cellular data option, you're now able to toggle between your primary and your business lines straight from the control center, which is super convenient. So one of the biggest hidden features in iOS 18 was something that a lot of people assumed was just a bug, and that was the ability to record video, like native video from the camera application, while playing music. So before, there were always workarounds of how to record music and record video at the same time, but it was always like kind of a hacky way to do it. But now that is actually a built-in feature with iOS 18. So you can now record video while playing audio, and you can see this inside of the settings. So if you go down to your camera settings, go to record sound, and in here, there's a new toggle for allow audio playback, and it says audio playback will not pause when recording a video. Now I have tested this multiple times over the past couple of weeks, and the audio quality is not great, but it does work. Now let's go back into the messages application, because I also wanted to clarify and get a little bit more specific on a feature. So if you go to the plus on the left of the text field and then scroll down, we have send later. So this is a new feature in iOS 18 where you can schedule iMessages to send up to 2 weeks in advance. And I've actually used this multiple times already here in my everyday, life. But one thing I realized is that you could actually still send the messages if your phone is turned off. So if you schedule a message to send a week from now and you turn your phone off for the next month, that message will still send. And I think that's because these messages are scheduled in Apple's own database for iMessage, which basically confirms that this will not work for SMS messages. You will not be able to schedule SMS messages, at least as of now. But that's pretty awesome that the message will just wait in the iMessage servers until that time, and then it will execute regardless of what your device's current state is. We also have a much needed change in the music application. So if you go into Apple Music and go into one of your playlists and then tap on the three dots in the top right and then go to edit, we have a slightly tweaked interface here, and you will notice that you can now delete multiple songs from a playlist at once. So you can select all of them and you can tap on delete, and it will remove all those songs from the playlist at once. So you can even select a bunch of songs and then add them to another playlist. So you can maybe go in here and then add those songs to a separate playlist. However, we still cannot delete the songs from a playlist from the now playing view, which is something I've been wanting for a very long time. In the passwords application, if you go into a password that you have saved for a website and you go down to the bottom, you'll notice that we have a website section. Now, if we tap on edit, we now get the option to add a website. So if you have the same password for multiple websites, or more specifically, if you have a password for a specific website, but maybe you can access it through multiple different URLs, you can now add those different URLs down there. So a good example would be like maybe Gmail, so maybe mail.google.com, and sometimes there's other variations of that URL. You can now add those down here to the websites, so it populates in your predictive text field to trigger that password. So you can now add multiple websites per password here in the passwords application. Also in the battery section, it will now show you if you have been using a slow charger. It will show up as orange on the graph, and it will indicate that you were using a slow charger, which is usually around 5 watts. Now, one of my favorite new features in iOS 18 is the ability to go into Notes and go to record audio. And then if you press on the little annotation icon down in the bottom left-hand corner, that will transcribe everything that you're saying while recording. So this is an awesome new feature in iOS 18, but something I didn't mention before is that this actually works. You can continue recording while your device is locked. So I've been using this a few times over the past couple of weeks, and I have my AirPods in, and then I just lock my device after I hit record, and I can talk through my AirPods, and it will transcribe everything, even though my device is locked and away in my pockets. Now, a funny little tidbit in the control center is that you can actually have 10 custom pages of toggles here in the control center. So if you have to press or just press down anywhere that's blank on the screen, or if you tap on the plus up in the top left and you add a control, you can make custom pages, and you can now make up to 10 custom pages, and you can also include as many as you want of the same toggle. So for example, if I just wanted to have a bunch of different text size toggles right here, I could just keep adding those, and you will see that I have all of these different text size toggles, as many as I want. I can keep going, and I can make 10 pages. I believe that is the limit for Control Center as of now. Now in the Safari application, we have a couple of changes here as well. So if you swipe over, you can see there's a new animation when you close out of a tab in Safari. Now another new feature is if you want to make a new tab group, you just go over to your last tab group and then simply swipe over, and it will create a new tab group, and we have this new little interface here where you can title it. And I have a lot of other iOS 18 features to cover, but I will save those for future videos, and that's why you are subscribed to the channel. But anyways, everything again is not perfect with iOS 18, so I did also want to touch on a few bugs and issues I've been encountering over the past week specifically, because I don't want to repeat myself from last week's video. And if you didn't see that, you can check that out in the cards. But I did want to mention a big issue I'm having with the fitness application. So I use the fitness app every single day. You can see, I close my rings. I try to close my rings every single day here. And I've been having quite an issue with the fitness application, both on the iPhone and on the Apple Watch. And that is that the stats are just simply not updating in real time anymore. And sometimes it just does not register when I walk a certain amount of time or my stand hours are way off. So both of those are issues on the iPhone and also on watchOS 11 Beta 1. So if you're having issues in the fitness app, it's not just you. And then here's a bug that happened to me on my iPad on iPadOS 18 Beta 1, where just one application stayed in jiggle mode no matter what. So it just stayed with jiggle mode right there. I can open it and then I go back, and it kind of just has that minus sign up there in the top left continuously for some odd reason. So that's a really strange bug that was pretty funny. Also in the settings application, if you go into the apps section and then go into pretty much any application and then go to Siri and search, you will notice at the bottom we have some placeholder text that is still there. So the switch itself has placeholder text, and the description underneath the footer is still placeholder. But overall, there's really not a lot of issues with iOS 18 Beta 1. I mean, it's been astoundingly impressive for me on every device I've used iOS 18 Beta 1 on, whether that's my iPad, whether that's my main iPhone, this iPhone, or my iPhone 14. I've been using it on multiple devices, and I've really had no issues aside from maybe visual issues over the past couple of weeks. Now, of course, the control center is not perfect. There are quite a few issues in the control center, and also with the home screen where icons may not change to dark mode, or the notification badges may look a different color and not match with the theme of the device. But again, a lot of the issues are just visual. There's really no, like app breaking or device breaking issues that make me want to go ahead and downgrade my device. And most importantly, calls work fine, text messages work fine, Safari works fine, and my banking applications work fine. So as far as, as long as those four things are working perfect for me, I have no complaints. And then as far as performance goes, performance is also pretty solid. I mean, I have had a few crashes here and there, but nothing has been detrimental to me. Nothing has been like when I'm in the middle of an important task, the application just crashes. That has not happened to me. I have had the Safari app crash a couple of times, but it's just been when I'm doing something, not really intensive or nothing really important. So that's been fine for me. And the overall performance has been great. There's a little bit of lag, but nothing to complain about. And you can see the new Geekbench score that I ran here as well. So pretty solid scores. But I will say the only downside to iOS 18 beta 1 is the battery life. So battery life for me on every device, even my iPad, is just not great. Like that is expected. So that's not really a big con to me, but I do have to tell you that battery life is not great on iOS 18 beta 1. It's not bad, but it's not even good, I wouldn't say. Like it's in the middle. You can tell it's beta software. If you've used the beta before, you pretty much already know what to expect. Sometimes I'll have things take up a ton of battery usage, even though I'm not actually using that application. Like I had the issue with background sounds before, and now the home and lock screen are taking up a lot of my battery. Over the last 10 days, 8% for home and lock screen is a lot. And especially when I have my auto timeout on like 5 minutes. So that's crazy. And you can see that just a lot of screen idle time as well, which means a lot of things just working in the background, which is, pretty indicative of poor battery life on iOS 18. So hopefully that will improve. I'm sure it will over the coming months. Okay, so now let's talk about when to expect iOS 18 beta 2 and also iOS 18 public beta, because I know a lot of you guys are waiting for the public beta, which is pretty wise. Even though beta 1 is running fine for me on the developer beta, it is always wise to wait for the public beta. So let's talk about when to expect those. So next week is the final full week of June, and I would expect to see iOS 18 developer beta 2 get released next week, most likely on Tuesday, the 25th. Future Brandon here, and it looks like iOS 18 beta 2 is actually going to be released on Monday, and this came from a report from The Verge, and they said that not only are we going to get that beta on Monday, but it's also going to include the new iPhone mirroring feature and the expanded SharePlay screen sharing feature. So Monday, not Tuesday. Now, I would not expect the public beta to come out that same week. I would not expect the public beta until probably the second or third week of July. So Apple typically releases that around developer beta 3. So with that in mind, after beta 2, we're probably going to go 2 weeks again without a release. So that puts us around the July 8th timeframe or July 9th timeframe for developer beta 3. And then we might see public beta that week or potentially even the week after, maybe on the week of July 15th. But I do not see the public beta coming anytime after the week of July 15th. I do think it will be within the first 3 weeks of July. And then of course, the final release for iOS 18 is not going to come until sometime in September, most likely September 16th or September 23rd. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And let's start with Apple clapping back at the EU, because they just revealed that Apple Intelligence, iPhone mirroring, and SharePlay screen sharing will not be coming to the EU this year because of the DMA, or the Digital Markets Act. Now keep in mind, those are 3 of the biggest features, not only of the year, but of the past several years. So those are 3 key features that are not going to be coming to the EU, and that is a big blow. And Mark Gurman on Twitter raised a good question. He said, do these features actually violate the DMA, or is Apple really unable to design around the privacy issues? Or is Apple doing this to get consumers in the EU to push back against the regulators? So I'm not so sure that all 3 of these features violate the DMA, but this is a big blow for the EU. And I think that a lot of people are going to be pretty frustrated with this, especially the Apple Intelligence features, which are massive for Apple. And that's all people are going to be talking about for the rest of this year. And speaking of Apple Intelligence, Apple just defended its AI device compatibility. So as you know, the AI features will be compatible only with the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max and newer, and also the M1 Max and newer. And I mentioned before here on the channel that I believe it's because of the 8 gigabytes of RAM. I believe that's the big restriction that is causing these older devices to not be compatible with these AI features. But we did just see some clarification, or at least something, from Apple. So this comes from Apple's AI and ML head, John G. I'm just going to call him John G. So he said this during this Q&A. And so it's a combination of bandwidth in the device, it's the size of the Apple Neural Engine, and it's the oomph in the device to actually do these models fast enough to be useful. You could, in theory, run these models on a very old device, but it would be so slow that it would not be useful. And Gruber responded with, so it's not a scheme to sell new iPhones? And then Greg Joswiak said, no, not at all. Otherwise, we would have been smart enough to just do our most recent iPads and Macs too, wouldn't we? Which is actually a good point because the M1 has been sold for a while now, for multiple years. So that's again why I think this does have more to do with the RAM inside than anything. And all these devices have one thing in common, and that is that they have 8 gigabytes of RAM. And also the A17 Pro chip is pretty much the first like M series chip on an iPhone as well. But nonetheless, that is what's going to happen, and that is Apple's kind of response and their defense against restricting these AI features to the latest and greatest devices. And let me just say that if the iPhone 16, the regular 16, also gets 8 gigabytes of RAM and gets these AI features, I think it's going to be a massive seller because I think a lot of people are going to want to upgrade to get to take advantage of these AI features. I know it sounds silly right now, but I'm telling you, I think it will be a big seller if the base model in every iPhone 16 is compatible with the AI features, which I think is going to be the case. So easily one of the biggest stories this week in regards to Apple was that they suspended or quit working on the Apple Vision Pro 2, and that caused the stock to go down. That caused a lot of people that didn't really know anything about Apple news to panic and just call the Apple Vision Pro a failure and that it was just going to have a slow death because Apple has already realized that it's not going to sell well, so they're just going to stop working on it indefinitely. And that was not the case at all. And that's what, it's partially the information's fault, who is the one who broke this story or, made this new report, which is not really new. We'll talk about here in a moment. But basically, the reason that Apple is suspending work on the Apple Vision Pro 2 is because they're currently working on a cheaper version of the Apple Vision line. It's not going to be the Apple Vision Pro. It could be the Apple Vision Air, Apple Vision SE, whatever. But that is where all of Apple's efforts are going currently, not on the follow-up to the first Apple Vision Pro. And the thing is, this was not new news. Even Mark Gurman said this on Twitter or X. He basically confirmed that this is what he's been reporting for a while now, because he said this in April: Apple's latest Vision Pro roadmap doesn't currently call for a second generation model until the end of 2026, though the company is trying to figure out a way to bring a cheaper version to market before then. So basically, we've known all this for months now, so this was really nothing new. Now, they did mention a few interesting things. So we did hear that Apple began working on a cheaper Vision Pro or a cheaper Vision device back in 2022 with the objective to sell it for around the same price as a high-end iPhone, which is around $1,600. Now, Apple apparently wants to retain the Vision Pro's high-end display components in the cheaper model, and they would cut back on costs by reducing the amount of cameras, producing a simpler headband, and reducing the size of the speakers. And I would imagine that the materials would be cheaper materials as well, because Apple is trying to make this next version of the Apple Vision headset much lighter than the Apple Vision Pro. And I want to know from you guys, will you actually be buying a Vision headset if it's under $2,000? Like, if Apple actually gets this headset to be between $1,600 and $1,900, will you actually buy a Vision headset? Let me know in a comment down below, because I am very curious. And then also this week, we did see Apple release the new Final Cut camera application for the iPhone. I made a full dedicated video on this, and I will leave that linked up in the cards and down in the description below, but it is pretty awesome. Also this week, Apple discontinued the Apple Pay Later feature, which is something I've never used, but it is where you can basically purchase a product and then make different payments for it over time. Now, we also got a very interesting report from Mark Gurman this week that talked about how Apple is going back to thinner devices for the MacBook Pro, the iPhone, and the Apple Watch. So over the past several years, Apple has kind of gone away from making devices thin and light. And obviously, the new iPad Pro M4 was Apple's first kind of shift over to back to being light and thin, but it looks like that's going to carry over to the Apple Watch, the iPhone, and the MacBook Pro as well. He said that Apple has figured out how to make its devices thinner again while still adding major new features, and I expect this approach to filter down to other devices over the next couple of years. Apple is now focused on developing a significantly skinnier iPhone in time for the iPhone 17 line in 2025. It's also working to make the MacBook Pro and Apple Watch thinner. The plan is for the latest iPad Pro to be the beginning of a new class of Apple devices that should be the thinnest and lightest products in their categories across the whole tech industry. So that sounds awesome to me. Like, I am impressed every time I pick up the M4 iPad Pro, which I have right here. It impresses me every time I hold this thing because it's it's so light and so thin for how big the display is and how powerful the device is. So as long as we can, not skimp out on features and that we don't have worse battery life, I am all the way here for thinner and lighter Apple products moving forward. But what do you think? And then finally, as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. And this time, a woman's flight got delayed in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport in late May. And it apparently left thousands of people stranded for days. So the woman knew that her luggage would also be delayed, but didn't sweat it. That is until it took American Airlines 5 full days to contact her, and they told her that her luggage had been delivered to her home, but she was at home and knew that it was not delivered there. So she did what all of us watching this channel would do. She checked the Find My app to see where her luggage was. And sure enough, it was not at her home. It was actually moving slowly down Western Avenue in Hollywood. So she went out herself trying to find the bag using the Find My application, and when she arrived at the spot that it was showing, she realized it was at a homeless encampment. And the bag was there, but all the items from the bag were thrown out all over the place, and the expensive items were missing, such as jewelry. And that's when a homeless man approached her and claimed to have bought the suitcase down the street. And down the street, she noticed other bags and suitcases with American Airlines tags on them in that same encampment. So they were basically being sold to these homeless. And this homeless man demanded that she pay for her own suitcase, to which the friend who was with her covered the cost so she was able to get it back. But after that incident, the woman filed a police report, but the police said it's the responsibility of American Airlines, who said that they were investigating and gave the woman a $1,700 reimbursement, which she claims is far below her estimated loss of over $6,300. I'm sorry, but who in the world is traveling with $6,300 in their suitcase? Like, if you have that much money in a suitcase, that should be in your carry-on, not your checked luggage. So that's kind of her fault for putting that much, those expensive items in that suitcase. That's just dumb in my opinion. But then again, without an AirTag, she probably would have never seen this luggage, this bag ever again. So that's why you put an AirTag in everything that you take on a plane that is in the hands of another person. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week.